So you know that we were invited by National League of Cities, I'm pretty sure, to engage in a National Day of Mourning. And I thought it was a really good thing to do. And Mitch, I think you saw that invitation as well. So that's how we're going to start our meeting today, acknowledging and recognizing the lives that have been lost during this tragic pandemic that we are all subjected to right now. And the proclamation, we'll each read a stanza, and it starts with Councilmember Evans.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Whereas today is the National Day of Mourning and Lament, an inclusive national effort that supports faith and healing from a multitude of religions, cultures, and secular public memorials. And
whereas the Rochester City Council joins elected leaders and faith leaders across the country as we collectively mourn, and together honor and remember the more than 100,000 individuals who have lost their lives to COVID-19. And
whereas, while the loss is massive and global, it is also personal. We have lost neighbors, friends, and family, grandfathers and grandmothers, fathers and mothers, aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters. And
whereas, throughout the course of the day, let us take moments to reflect on those lost, to offer prayers, to send positive energy, to reach out to our neighbors, friends, and loved ones so that they do not feel the weight of this loss alone. And
whereas for months we have been unable to properly grieve, we have been isolated when we want to be together, to have not attended funerary services, nor had our tears calmed by the warm embrace of loved ones who share our sorrow. And
whereas the magnitude of life lost must sound an alarm, everyone must do their part to stop the spread of this virus and follow guidelines around distancing and masking so that we may protect ourselves and our circles. And
whereas the magnitude, oops, sorry, that was you, Jackie. Whereas, as we lament, we recognize this virus has exposed a disparity in our systems, disproportionately impacting vulnerable populations, the elderly, Black, Brown, and Native communities, and our Asian neighbors who have been targeted by hateful words and actions. And
whereas to lament is to feel, show, or express grief, sorry, or regret. To mourn deeply and to lament is human. We should show ourselves and others compassion as we process our feelings of loss. And
whereas we must come together, mourn together, and build ourselves back up together. This loss is staggering. And as we heal, we must never forget those who were taken from us by this terrible disease. Now, therefore, we, Council President Loretta C. Scott, Vice President Willie J. Lightfoot, and council members Malik D. Evans, Mitch Gruber, Lachey D. Harris, Mary Lupian, Jacqueline Ortiz, Michael A. Patterson, and Jose Pio of the City of Rochester do hereby proclaim June 1st, 2020 to be the National Day of Mourning and Lament. Now, please join me in a moment of silence as we reflect on those who've lost their lives to COVID-19. Thank you. Okay. I would like to certainly commend BJ. He actually wrote this proclamation. They didn't send the material with the invitation. They just said, you know, you want to do this. And he put that together. You did an outstanding job as usual, BJ. Thank you so much.
Very nice.
thank you, BJ.
good job, BJ.
Okay, so our committee chair reports. Councilmember Evans, I think we start with you. Is that right?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. So everyone knows, obviously, we got a busy next couple of weeks. It's going to be hard to do with all that we got going on between the pandemic and all this other stuff, but we got to soldier through it. So on Wednesday, as you know, we have hearings all day from 9 to 5. For the newer people, I would urge you to maybe start with the information that BJ sent out. I think he did a good job in terms of synthesizing and giving background and comparisons from year over year things. We're going to start at 9 o'clock, obviously, with the council and clerk hearing, and then end at the last hearing is from 4:05 to 5 with emergency communications. And then we'll do a quick lunch for an hour between 12:45 and 1:45. Because of the way we have the schedule outlined, if for some reason we'll wrap up a hearing early, we'll just have to wait for that time. So that might give you a break in the unlikely event that we wrap a hearing early and there are not tons of questions. Because we're going to be online, going to have to be pretty strict in terms of the way in which we run the hearing to make sure that we're not talking over each other. So I'll convene the hearing and then I'll probably start with giving the administration, each department, less than a minute to kind of say anything they want to open up with and introduce the people that are with them. And then we'll get right into questions. Just for consistency's sake, I'll start with committee members and any of the questions that they may have. We're going to go section by section. And then what I'll do is I'll call on everybody individually to see if they have questions. If you don't have a question on the section that's there, you can say pass. And then I'll go back around and do another pass of each council member to make sure everyone's asked their questions. If someone asks a question that you kind of want to add something onto, or you have something you want to say that relates to that's tangential to the conversation, if you can just put in the chat box, I have a question related to something that I may have asked, and then I'll say, I'll call on the person that way. So I'll try to do that to try to keep it as organized as possible. I know this is the first time in history, we've ever done a budget hearing ever, through this form of communication. Is not the ideal method, but it is what it is. The coronavirus is still real, so we have to exercise social distancing. So we'll just get through it the best way we can. And then next week, in addition to our second hearing on the 9th, we'll also have the hearing on the 10th with the Rochester City School District. So we'll follow the similar format to that, same format. So be patient with me as we try to get through it. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is in terms of legislation, you saw legislation, nothing, we only have a couple of items. The one thing, and the president can speak to this, is we may have to have a special council meeting soon because we're coming towards the end of the year and we still haven't gotten clarity yet in terms of the state and whether or not there will be clawbacks, but we do want to be mindful of the fact that we want to make sure that we are in a good cash position. So there may be a need for us, there is going to be a need for us to have a RAND for the city, for us, to make sure that we are in a strong cash position at the end of the year, in the unlikely event that the state, in the unlikely or likely event that the state claws back any funds. We want to make sure that we're covered. So you may be seeing that, and obviously, Madam President will give guidance on whether or not when we have a meeting to vote on that. The only other thing I'll add before I wrap up is the school district also may be coming for a RAND. As you know, they do come to us from year to year for a RAND to cover payroll in the event that they do. The legislation will spell out what mechanisms that we have in place to ensure that we get our funds back from the RANDs that we do. But that's just a standard thing that we do on a regular basis.
We didn't receive the legislation yet, did we, BJ?
I have not received it yet, no. Hazel, has the clerk's office received anything? No, no additional legislation.
Yeah,
Except for
so,
the meeting on Friday.
so
I
we haven't
wouldn't,
gotten it. So, yes,
No.
we haven't gotten it yet, but we were told that it may be forthcoming. I'll check with the finance that it is.
Malik, you
So
have
those
broken
are
up a
the
bit.
main things. Oh, no, I said I'll check with our budget director to see where we are with that. And that's all.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
First of all, in terms of the actual budget hearing, I am, God, I am not looking forward to doing 2 full days on Zoom, as I'm sure nobody is, but I guess we don't have a choice.
Certainly not. We're with you.
Yeah. So, you know,
Yeah.
in the past, I think one of the things that gets a little bit tough with the budget hearings is we start out going section by section, and then by the end, and this is not an indictment of you, Malik. I think you do as good a job as anyone could, but usually by the end of the day, where it's more just kind of who's got a question in this department.
Right.
I think it's more important than ever with Zoom especially for me, because I have a lot of questions, for me to be really clear about what the plan is. Are you going to try to be consistent of section by section for the entirety of the 2 days?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to be, but but you know, I recalibrate in the event when I see that. Now, that's a good question, because let me put an asterisk on that. If I see that people are itching and they no longer are interested in section by section, then I'll move to overall questions. But in the beginning, I want to try to start with section by section. But I've noticed, like, for example, last year, people were exhausted by the section by section, and their questions were more universal. If we get to that point, then we can do that. But let's try to start with section by section, and then maybe on the second pass, if we've exhausted the section questions, let's make them more broad and universal.
Thanks. I guess my request, and it's nothing but a request, Malik, is that if we get to a point where and I agree with you, I think it is based on fatigue that you end up kind of opening it up to department. I would just ask that if you do that, to leave a little bit more space than usual, more dead space, because if there's questions towards the end of a section, it's just a little bit clunkier on Zoom. It's hard to kind of stop and figure out, okay, I need to look 3 sections ahead now, and just a little bit more time and space for that would be really helpful. But I will follow your lead on however you want to end up doing the questioning.
Yeah, okay.
And then my other question was just in terms of the RCSD budget. I know we got a letter from Corporation Counsel. I just didn't know, is there anything that you, it felt a little ambiguous to me, the letter from Tim. I don't know if there's anything that you want to comment on that prior to the RCSD budget hearing, or if we should just kind of read between the lines of that letter.
I can make a comment on that if you don't mind. That was not general. That wasn't just from Tim Curtin. That was Tim Curtin answering questions that were asked by council members. So that wasn't sent in a vacuum. It was a response to questions.
Right. There was there were questions about the process of approving the district budget, and he responded to that in an email. But then we asked for it to be put in a letter, so that way all council could get it, and that's what that was.
And it seems too that there's question on the school district side. If we do make alterations, they could just undo them. And I'm not, I don't know the legalness of that. But I think he was just talking from our end, right?
That was just from our end in terms of what our statutory authority is as it relates to the budget. It's pretty much in the city charter.
So just a question and a comment. So the question is, what's the status of the current revenue anticipation note they have outstanding that caused all this trouble? When does that get paid off?
That gets paid. I believe should have been the end of this. Should have been last month. May. We can check. I can check with the budget director. There was no concern, and I don't want to alarm people. There was no concern about them being able to pay off the revenue anticipation note, the last one. My understanding is it's going to be paid just like all the other ones were. There's been no red flags or anything from budget or finance related to that. And you know, sometimes it is us that sometimes tells them that they should take a RAM, because remember, we look at their cash flow on a weekly basis. Staff looks at the district's cash flow on a weekly basis, particularly as it relates to payments that are coming in and out. So there's been no concerns in terms of that being paid back. It's going to be paid back, and we would not reissue another one if it's not. And any of the ones that we do issue going forward, we make sure that there's a stopgap to ensure that we're going to recoup any dollars that we send.
And the last thing is, just want to commend BJ for the work they did on the school district analysis. BJ and the team, great work. If you haven't read it yet, and Lord knows it's been a busy weekend, you might not have. It is definitely worth reading. Very informative and pretty darn thorough on a document that has its challenges, and we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mike. And I think, to your point, I would urge everybody to not just the district's budget, but again, as I said earlier, the entire narrative that BJ and staff put together. I think that is very, very helpful in terms of going through the budget process. Thanks again to BJ and everyone.
Have we heard from the, sorry, BJ.
Controller?
Go ahead, council member.
Have we heard from the controller's office regarding our request for their?
I was just about to mention that. We got an email from him, I think it was today, still pops up on the screen, saying that he was working on that and he would get it done. I didn't get to read all of it, but he was saying that their offices have been vandalized with the violence over the weekend, but most of the damage was on the first floor, so he felt that he'd be able to complete that. I guess there was some misunderstanding or a desire for clarification that we had actually requested that, and he hadn't been formally assigned to present that in writing, but it transitioned into the written report that he'll be sending to us. How long did he say it would be, BJ? Because I didn't read the whole thing.
How long did he say the report would be?
No, before he got it in. He said he was working overnight or something.
Yeah, the goal is to have it to us about 10 days prior to the council vote, which would be on or around June 5th, which is Friday.
And he's working to try and get that done. Although he said that it was in much better shape than it had been previously, that their work was looking much better than it had been previously. So we'll get that to you as soon as he gets it out.
I'm also just wanting to note that the Finance Committee this month will review the consolidated plan, which is part of the submission, and Katie Hasselwander in our office has done a great job putting together an analysis which looks at a very different plan this year than in the last 5-year plan. She has sent it to me over the weekend, and we've gone back and forth with a couple revisions, and we anticipate that you will get the analysis of the con plan either today or tomorrow to help you with looking at that piece in finance and a number of the items that you'll get in NBD as well.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councilmember Patterson.
Thank you. Well, end of the fiscal year, fair amount of work in BD from what we're seeing here. Nothing too wild or crazy or outside of the range. A lot of CDBG work that tends to show up, reauthorization of the demo program, sale of real estate. Nothing really crazy. I believe I've got the meeting sometime this week, so we'll be getting in there to see what's going on there. Councilmember Lupien raised an interesting concern about 15 minutes ago regarding folks wondering if folks would be able to tap into the emergency assistance program that we have for businesses for the damages that have been done. Don't really know, but I encouraged her to send her folks back over towards Gary, towards that program. If there's a problem or an issue or a concern, we can iron it out. But today's Monday. All of this happened Saturday and Sunday. Something tells me NBD is well aware and is going to do everything they can. If they turn the check around in 3 days before, If something tells me that if there's still dollars available, they'll be working with local businesses to get that stuff out there. And if they need more money, something tells me we'll be hearing about it real soon. So let's hope that folks are aware that those dollars are out there for our local businesses that are challenged. And let's hope that they avail themselves of these opportunities that are here. So other than that, not a whole lot to talk about in NBD yet.
Okay. Councilmember Lupian also had called me earlier about the fact that today's the 1st and the concern about people with paying rent, which I think I had listed during our presentation from NBD as well, but they reminded me that we have money in is it the CARES grant? That we have money in the CARES grant for rent to help people avoid homelessness. And it's one other category here. So I don't recall whether that was one they said they could put more money in or not, but I know that there's a chunk in there.
Right. Well, I think one of the challenges that we're facing, and I'm just going to say it, and I don't know how anybody else feels about it. When you're trying to prioritize the bills that you're going to pay, you got to eat. Okay, so we get that. But right after you got to eat, you got to have somewhere to stay. So, best you can do, I would just encourage folks, talk to your landlord. If you look like you're short, you're going to be short. Have that conversation with your landlord now. Don't let it be a surprise, and it shouldn't have been a surprise all this time. Keep talking to folks. I mean, I don't think folks are chomping at the bit to evict people. I think, but at the same time, being a landlord is a business, and they have debts that they have to pay also. So I think as long as folks are keeping clear communication and doing everything they can to pay something to work with their landlords, I think landlords are going to be reasonable. But these are the challenging times that we face. So it's rough, it's hard all over. So, but at the same time, the other side of that argument is, there were a group of people out there telling people not to pay the rent. That's kind of hard to do. I mean, if you got it, pay it. If you can't, we'll have a conversation. That's just my editorial on that.
Mary, I know you had a comment on that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think there's a lot of reasons, that people aren't paying rent. One of them just being that they can't, but I think there was also a misunderstanding of what the moratorium meant, as well as, the cancel rent movement, which, it took a long time for me to really understand, but it's, at least locally, they were advocating for people to stand in solidarity with folks who couldn't pay rent and their landlords weren't working with them. It wasn't like a blanket cancel rent, but regardless, I think that we don't have any idea how many people there are that, as soon as, because I think we have a little bit of a breather. It's June 1st, but I don't think the housing courts are open. And as far as I know, they don't have a date yet. But when it does, how many people are going to be evicted? And, the bar is not paying rent due to COVID. And, are people going to be able to prove it? We don't know. So I think, just anecdotally, landlords are reporting 30 to 40% of their tenants not being able to pay rent. That's kind of a staggering number. Some are working with them, some don't want to or can't. So, I don't know what resources we as city council have. I don't think we have the power to cancel rent ourselves. But what can we do? I know we have limited funds. Yeah, I think it could be very, we could see a lot of people packing homeless shelters, and then that affects all of us if we're still trying to social distance. So just trying to raise that up.
Well, and I'm waiting for you to dive in here, Jackie. But
well, I was waiting. I was just basically saying, so I think two things. One, I think because this is such an important topic with everything going on, if there's a way for NBD as they get moving on these funds that are available for these things to give us as often an update as possible, because we don't know how many people and we don't know how many landlords that are not working, like as Mary had said. So I think we need I dare to say daily, weekly, whatever it is, updates from NBD in terms of the flow of folks that are applying and the balance that's left. So as we're communicating with residents, we can say, there's still money available. There's still money available until it's not. So that's one thing in terms of getting regular in-time updates from NBD. But then the other thing is from these landlord coalitions, as Jamie had once said, they are not happy with landlords who, one, have issues in their properties and also are these type of landlords that don't want to assist. And we start to get from either residents or from these landlords, well, who are these property owners that are basically, not working with folks or tenants that are not wanting to pay? How do we start to make some of those identifications for outreach? Because I think, again, we don't know what we don't know until it gets identified. So I don't know if NBD can help us with that, the landlord coalitions, but housing council, whomever, one way or another, some identifications need to be made so outreach can happen.
Well, I think we can count on BJ to relay that stuff over to NBD. But I think one of the things we just need to keep in mind here is you can't do an eviction without an order from the court. So we'll start seeing what's really going on once the courts open back up and we see what kind of response they're getting there. A lot of judicial discretion. So if everybody's showing up and everybody got the same problem, are you really going to evict everybody? I'm not a judge and I don't play one on TV. I don't know. But I would hope that would be something that judges would be taking into consideration. It's going to be a challenge, but this is going to be a challenge that is going to be a national, first it's going to be a statewide challenge. And then it's going to be a national challenge. In some jurisdictions, it's already a national challenge. So we'll see, but we have limited funds when they're gone, unless the federal government comes through with some money, we're going to be limited on what we can do. And whatever money, the dollars that they gave us, if you're looking at 40% of the renting population out there being behind on the rent, whatever we got is gonna go fast. Yeah. So then when it's gone, because we ain't got nothing else to give. So now what you gonna do? So so we can spend it, no problem. We already got it allocated to be spent, but it ain't gonna solve the problem. And that's not anything the small municipality of the city of Rochester is gonna solve. This is gonna be something that the United States government is gonna have to solve.
Did you see that the state legislature, both the Senate and Assembly, passed a bill, I think it was 2 days ago, the $100 million rent voucher program? It hasn't been signed by the governor yet, but it's to people who were affected by coronavirus. It was kind of seen as a win-win between landlords and tenants. So I don't know where that stands, but that might provide some relief also.
Well, that sounds great, but where the $100 million gonna come from? Like the state of New York's got it to spend, right? Yeah, okay. If they do, great. But at the meantime, he's looking to reach in our pocket.
Yeah, but it was passed, so we'll see what happens with it.
Yeah, it's pandering. I'm sure it passed. Everybody looks good. I'm a hero. New York State ain't got no money.
But Mary, I hear your concern as the bar being people impacted by COVID. I hear it, but and there are going to be a lot who can't pay, not because they were impacted by COVID, but because they don't have the money for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. So that's an issue that is longstanding. We didn't solve it before COVID, and I fear we won't be able to solve that after COVID. But for now, we at least have the hope of resources to deal with those people who are directly impacted by not being able to pay rent based on the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I think with what we have now, maybe we don't, but it's, thinking to the future, what can change in order to help? I mean, that's a big question.
Yeah. Okay. PPW?
Yeah, PPW, there's a couple of things that are coming that are particularly exciting for the implementation of our climate action plan, including an agreement for community choice aggregation, a grant agreement for greenhouse gas inventory updates and a heat emergency plan. But again, I think I said this last month, you'll see very deliberately, you'll see less major construction out of the PPW committee over the next couple of months because we put through those items in the spring or late winter so that things could be in place for construction to begin as soon as possible. So it's a fairly light PPW packet, couple of grant awards, and I'm having my meeting with Commissioner Jones tomorrow. So if there's any specific questions people have that you want me to ask, feel free to let me know.
The electric cars, is that in PPW? I think it's in PPW, right?
I think that's in finance, President Scott.
What? Oh, I missed that now.
She's in 11.
Yeah, that's in finance. So, but regarding that, can we find out what's the provision for insurance? Like if somebody is in an accident in one of those things or gets banged up.
Would you like to add that to the agenda review questions?
Yeah, please. Thank you. Okay, so PSYR.
Oh, thank you, Madam President. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well and your families are doing great. Of course, I had a very eventful weekend with public safety, of course. So I will try to give a quick summary of the events over the weekend. Of course, we had a very peaceful protest that was put on, very organized, very peaceful protest that was put on at the MLK and then went down to the public safety building. We know that there were some outside individuals that hijacked that peaceful protest. And right now there are active investigations going on. Their pictures are all over every news media outlet. And we're asking the community, as well as social media, we're asking the community to help us come forward with information to try to, there will be more arrests to follow. There were 13 arrests that were made this weekend. I can tell you I had very little sleep this weekend, just praying and hoping that everybody, my son even worked this weekend. So of course I was just overly concerned for everyone. And I want to say that my hats go off to our mayor, our chief of police, our firemen, and all of the police officers. We lost no lives this weekend, thank God. We had no homicides. There was only 13 arrests, more to follow. No one got hurt. We had one firefighter who was injured on engine 1, which is on Monroe Avenue. They were kind of somewhat oversieged by the public, and some glass fell in his eye. He's doing okay. He's recovering. I talked to the union president, fire union president this morning, inquiring about his well-being, and he's doing fine, recovering well. There was another incident with engine 5 that's on Lyle Avenue that had happened, as well as looters and rioters, if you will, doing undesirable things. So that was, but I would say that originally the intel that we received from the chief was that these events across the country have normally been supposed to last 4 to 5 days. So I say that to say that really speaks to the efforts of our police department. Of course, the governor providing additional New York State Trooper services was also very helpful. And then also the education that our mayor put around this incident. And I've seen Rochester stand up in a way that brought my heart felt real good yesterday, to have over 2,000 people show up at the Frontier Field for an impromptu clean sweep that we had yesterday. And you would not know, if you rode around our community less than 24 hours after this place was under siege, that you wouldn't know it even happened had it not been for the boards that are on the wall, because all the cleanup was done so swiftly and quickly by this community. Everyone came out, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, came out in this community, young kids, people just coming out of surgery was out there helping. And it was just an amazing thing to see Rochester stand up. And the fact that this did not continue on Sunday night was a testament to our law enforcement and to the collaboration of everybody working on that effort. So I'm just glad that we were able to get through this weekend with as minimum damages to property and life safety as possible. Of course, this is June, so it's National Gun Violence Awareness Month. So we want to make sure everyone is aware of that and is understanding of that. I'm jumping off the call. I'm gonna have to jump off at 1:30. I have a meeting with the Rock Against Gun Violence Homicide Response Plan. We're finishing up this plan. I've been talking to you guys about this for a while. We've been working on this plan for almost 2 years. And we're at a point where we're almost done with this plan and presenting it to the mayor, the police chief. And then hopefully I'll be bringing it to you guys just to see the work that we've done around the Rock Against Gun Violence Homicide Plan. We have had 12 homicides, ladies and gentlemen, this year. We're not far from where we were last year this time. Last year we had 32 homicides. So we have closed 5 of those cases out of 12 have been closed. Our most recent one, of course, was Dakota, the 20-year-old young man that was murdered on Dewey Avenue last week. And so that was our most recent homicide that we've had. We're putting together because of social distancing and COVID, we normally have a proclamation and we normally meet the coalition in front of City Hall. And you guys, a lot of you are a part of that. And we do our proclamation and we do our whole launch of National Gun Violence Awareness Month. Due to social distancing, physical distancing, of course, we're not going to be able to do that. But what we're going to be doing, working along with city communication, is we're going to be doing a panel discussion on June 24th around the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition, bringing in families and victims of those who've suffered from violence within our community, and having a holistic conversation around. So we're going to do that via Zoom. We're going to be live feeding it on Facebook and YouTube and all of those things. So we're preparing to put that event together real soon. We also, of course, there's something in our proposal or in our legislation for next month, which is this month, I should say, for the forfeiture funds. You see that come through every year where they put that $5,000 towards the Think About It campaign. That's the billboards, the social media campaign, all of that thing. We're going to try to get all of that stuff up in July if everything goes forward, and of course, if it passes. That was pretty much, there's some stuff for the animal services, and there was nothing else, biz kids, nothing that was controversial or that haven't came through in the past. I have not yet met with, well, I shouldn't say that. I've been with the chief all weekend. Literally. So and the mayor, so he's probably tired of me texting him and calling him. So I'm gonna get a chief a little break for a couple of days, ladies and gentlemen. Then we'll get back to him and just see if there's anything else that we should be concerned or aware of. But it was a pretty tough weekend. But I have to say, through it all, Rochester showed its resilience, and we stood up, and we did not allow people to come in and tear up our city.
Speaking of which, I sent you all, Mary, I think I'm gonna left you off, pictures that I gotten from Justin. Those are from the riot, and the pictures are very enlightening. No pun intended.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, they're. I'm gonna say it. I'll say it. And it's because it's real. There were Caucasian people that were really pushing the violence that we saw. Now, they weren't the only ones, but they, as the mayor said, they lit the match, right? And then people started to follow their lead. And these people were very organized. They did this all across the country, all across New York State. And what we're hearing from the intel, and there were even threats made to our mayor. There were threats that were made to a lot of people. And what we know is that they tried to do this for several days. But again, our hats off to the sheriff, the governor, the police chief, the county executive, the mayor, for really putting out the message to our community of what this was about, educating our community on not letting people come in, external people come in. And we know that there were internal, there were people that live in this city that were acting, there are thieves and thugs who look for opportunities like these, right? To go and do what they do, regardless of COVID or whatnot. They thieves, so they look for thieving opportunities.
Right, opportunities here.
Okay, and so we saw a lot of that going on. But the thing that to me that was most egregious and the thing that hurt me the most was that the two that were beaten with them
The
2x4s.
lady.
That to me was just I was horrible. And I hope that people will come forward with information and that those people can be brought to justice, because to me that was just ridiculous. And so we're much better than that. Of course, everybody knows that. But
although I'll say, well, and I'm the last person to know what is true or false in this world on these particular issues. But in that particular scenario of the Rochester fire, what's the name of that business?
Yeah, it's like they do fire extinguishers. Yeah, they refill extinguishers.
So, right on the corner of Monroe and the Interloop there.
Right. Yes. So I was seeing on social media, and again, full context of social media. So who knows that there is evidence that the young lady who came out there to defend her store also called the folks who were there the N-word.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying they didn't or weren't provoked. What I can say is when you take a 2x4 and go upside a woman's head, is just there's no, I can't justify. I hear you. I hear you.
I'm not meant to justify anything, but it leads me to the major question that I have, which is that I think the entire thing that we saw, and I cannot be more explicit about this when I talk to people. And I know that Councilmember Pio was saying the other night via text message that if we had listened to him, we would have been able to address things here. Let me be very, very clear about this. This was a national movement. There were protests and riots and real violence across the nation over the course of the weekend. And there was nothing that we as council could have done to prevent that. But I want to make sure that we as council can do a lot to learn from it. And I think the whole question becomes about what is the difference between where is the line between being provoked and between being proactive? And to me, I'm very concerned about how much violence there was on all sides. And I want to understand from RPD if and when we're going to get some type of report that from their understanding of what happened, when, why, the course of events, so that we can make sure that we have some learnings from this.
Sure, yeah. I definitely request, and I'm coming right back to you, Mary. I definitely will request that from the chief, and we'll get updated as he always does. What I will say though is there's a much larger issue here that we've been very proactive in, and that's the race, equity, and leadership that we started in this city 2 years ago. Now I think people will really understand how significant this work is, right? Because clearly it was not nothing new of what we see as a result of COVID, the disparities of these marginalized communities and Black and brown and the issues that we have with systemic racism and structural racism within all systems within our community. So I think that by us having those conversations, that we have to begin to unpack the trauma associated with all of that, right? And we have to begin to continue to lead those conversations across collaborative networks that we've been working on internally in City Hall, and then outside to our external partners, whether they're business, not-for-profit, or whatnot, so that we can continually continue the conversation around race equity, because we clearly have an issue, and it's not a Rochester issue, it's an American issue, and I'm just grateful that we started this work earlier, and then we can continue it as opposed to us trying to start it now as a result of this. See, this wasn't the reason why race equity was brought to Rochester. It wasn't the reason why NOC started it across America, right? Because they understood when you go back to the events that happened a couple of years ago, right? And that we've seen across the country in Ferguson. That led us to that led NOC to this work. And then now we're seeing it repeating itself. Every time we see these type of incidents spark these conversations. So I just want to say, I hear you, Councilmember Gruber, and I think that Rochester is in a great position. This council is in a great position to help our constituents, to help our collaborative partners to begin to continue this conversation around race equity and the impact that it has on our families and the trauma that we have to help them unpack as we begin to try to have one community and not a separated community.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say, you know, I've also heard that, you know, and it's hard to know what happened, right? But that the peaceful protest got escalated as well due to the tear gassing and the rubber bullets, and that people of color were getting hit with rubber bullets when, you know, the white people weren't. And I'd like to know, you know, we don't have a PAB that's functioning yet, but in the interim, you know, how do we evaluate these kind of situations for, you know, the police response? And it's an uncomfortable thing to say now because, you know, they did so much work on Saturday, right? And we appreciate that. But the questions that still exist, you know, that the Black Lives Matter movement is raising around, you know, accountability, but not just accountability, but also, you know, the resources that we're putting towards the police department. You know, we kind of spend equal amounts on the police and the school district. And, you know, around the country, people are asking, you know, could those funds be, you know, some of them be diverted to violence prevention efforts that aren't police related? So just to bring that into the conversation.
Yeah, no, I hear the conversation. I know there's national movements around, you know, people want to undo the funding from the police department and all these kind of things. And I hear that. And I think that's a conversation for us to continue to have as we move forward. But what I will say is this, people, you know, and I'm not pro-police, I'm not anti-police, but I'm about equity and having equal across the board. And I think what the conversation has to understand, or what people need to understand when you start talking about dismantling the police department or unfunding them, when somebody's breaking into your house and you dial 911, you want the police to come. All right, let's stop playing.
Yes,
Let's
sir.
stop being
Yes,
silly.
sir.
Okay. All right. If somebody busts you upside your head, you're gonna want somebody justice. Okay. So I don't care where you live.
I'm not suggesting
No,
that.
I'm not saying you are.
Yeah.
I'm just giving my perspective on the matter. Okay.
But
So at the end of the day, we have to find some equality. We have to find how do we have fair, equal, respectable justice from our police department? And then how do we also have fair, respectable relations between the community and police? Because it's a two-way street. It's a two-way street. We can't just say they got to do everything right, but then we cussing police officers out, we acting belligerent, we're not complying when giving directives. I mean, it's got to be a holistic equality conversation when it comes to police and community relations.
Not only that, I want to bring it back. We need to, at some point, we as council, we need to talk about hiring from the city, bringing that requirement for RPD to be living in the city, because we need people from our communities being involved with policing our communities so that we can further address this issue.
We can't require them to live in the city once they're on the force, but we can require that they live in the city to be hired. That's my understanding. And other cities have done that, including Buffalo. And I think that shows, you know, we don't want people necessarily coming in from the suburbs, having grown up in the suburbs all their life policing. That's not going to make a difference. Right. But if you can show that they've been here for years and know what the city's about and know the people, and then they move to the suburbs, like, you know, there's an argument to be had about their money enriching our city, but they've got the mentality of understanding that this isn't a war zone.
I also have a question. So, Willie, with all the work that's being done with the REAL initiative, and I know, like as you said, it's been ongoing, is there a point in time where we would anticipate seeing some of the policy recommendation and changes that we would be making? Is there a time frame for that?
Yes, well, I would say this, Councilman Ortiz, we now have an equity officer, okay, which we have not had in the past, Dr. Cephas, And so we're restructuring things in such a way. We just finished up some playbooks that we're getting ready to be dispensing to some of our community partners. And yes, we're working on policy changes. Part of the timeline was for us to go through the undoing racism stuff that we know the council was going through, for us to get an understanding of where we're going. The training was always first. We have to get educated on what we're talking about. We have to get on the same page, because when you ask somebody about racism, if I ask all 9 of you, what does that mean? We may get 9 different answers. So if we don't understand and we get to a collective one understanding of what we're trying to deal with, then we're going to just be spinning our wheels. So the education and the training part is what we've been doing over the last 2 years. That's the first part. And then we're trying to get everybody through that, including SMT, the mayor, and of course, council and PAB. Simultaneously, we're working on policy, practices, and procedures. And the idea is for us to begin to start developing some of that, some of those thoughts and some of the examples of things that should help come from not only just the community, but it's your ideas. Each and every one of you, I said today on DBDKX, we're one of the most diverse city councils, I believe, in the country. I would argue anybody to look for a city council that looks like us. If there's not a time where this council, can be able to come up with equity policies, practices, and procedures, which, by the way, first time since we're talking budget earlier, Malik, first time in history, I believe, that the city of budget has equity tools that we're using within our budget process. So that's a policy right there. There's a policy for you right there. You know what I mean? That we're implementing right now. You know what I'm saying? So there are things that have already come out of this, but there's more to come. We don't have all of the answers, and the timeline isn't as strict as maybe some would want, because it's never been done before, right? So we don't want to move too fast and not get a collective input from everyone, because that's what causes the problem when you talk about race equity, is when it's led by one voice, right?
Right. And I hear exactly what you're saying, but I guess I was under the impression, so correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a review of actual policies in place currently to take a look through those through that racial equity lens. Sure. And actually make recommendations for language changes, new policies if necessary. But I thought that a group of folks were working on, all right, let's start at the top, policy 1, policy, whatever, obviously that's overly simplified, but I thought that was what part of the work was.
It is. And workforce planning was one of them, community development, meeting development. Remember the charter we put out, there were 4 areas that we were looking. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And we have, thank God for Letitia Doucette and Lomax, Dr. Lomax, and they've been a lot. What I would say is, compared to other cities, we're much further along, because the training, we were trying to do them all simultaneously. And what we found out, the training was so well received by the employees, right? That we had to really give a really robust training and change team piece. So that's happening ongoing. And I would say probably by, if not the end of this year, beginning of next year, we'll probably have more concrete things. And if you look in your budget book, under the equity piece, that's your timeline. It's right in the budget book. It's laid out. It's a lot of work, and you can see that's for the 2 years how much work has been done around this. So there's very strict timelines in the budget book around this work.
And it does. You talked about some of the tools that we're using, and those are reflected in the budget book as well. That we did do a review of our various operations and identify deficiencies that impact racial equity. We, even in council and maybe clerks, I know in council, I think we identified that we have a bilingual position to increase access. And I forget what else we've got up there, but each department had to do some of this. Some of it's kind of low-hanging fruit that you look at the way you operate and say, what can we do to address some of these things that might be barriers that would serve to create unequal playing fields in terms of racial equity.
President Scott, that was also requested in Council Member Evans's memo to the departments, and for the departments that have their budget hearing on June 3rd, those or their racial equity budget submission has been shared with the council already. So you should have that in your emails.
Okay. Wonderful.
Okay, Madam President, I would ask to, if there's no other questions for me, if I can be excused, I have another meeting to log on to.
Understood.
All right.
We'll need to have our conversation about police accountability. So you're up on that. So, all right.
All right, thank you.
Mhm. So is there a motion to go into executive session to discuss police accountability board appointments?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. We
One
have,
moment, we have to stop
Okay.
sharing online.